Today we're here with Shawn Rider, past high school teacher, business owner, and what I'd like to focus on today is his successful investing in short-term rentals. Right out of the gate, Shawn, would you mind sharing how you got into real estate and specifically why you're leaning more towards the short-term rental?
Yeah, so I could go down the deep rabbit hole on it, but after years of being a high school teacher, like you said, turned into a business owner, working really hard to generate income for myself. After a while, you start studying other people who are putting their money to work for them in certain ways, however you want to define that, putting your money to work, building wealth, saving for retirement, owning assets. It became very clear to me that the people who I looked up to, the people that I followed, yes, they owned businesses. Yes, they were very creative. They might have been entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs within another business, but many of those people did own real estate, and real estate is a very broad topic. And so how I got into it was exposing myself to people who owned real estate, whether that was one property or many properties. And it came down to educating myself first. I think everything that I had to do in my life and other people, as they want to learn something, you have to educate yourself first. And so I started learning about the real estate game. And then as I started exposing myself to the ins and outs of real estate, that's where I started getting pulled towards short-term rentals. And the short answer to why short-term rentals was I was all about trying to figure out cash flow. I knew with any real estate, I was getting appreciation long-term. I knew that was going to happen. I knew I was going to get certain tax incentives. That was going to happen. But at the end of the day, when I looked at the numbers and what my desire was to have a higher opportunity to earn more money through the dollars that I put to work, the data could not be denied in my eyes that short-term rentals was the way for me to go to tap into the real estate market.
Awesome. And in doing that research, just out of curiosity, how much of a difference do you see as far as, cash on cash between, just a traditional, year-long lease, 2-year lease rental as opposed to what you're doing here in, the short-term rental space?
Yeah, many answers can start with it depends. But when you're looking at a basic long-term rental cash on cash return, people are going to aim for low double digits, 10, 15, maybe some people can squeak out 17%. I'm not sure. But when you start looking at short-term rentals, if you have any viable experience in helping people and creating value, you're very easily looking at 20, 25, 30%. And then what I learned was once I got into a property or once I owned the asset, I could figure out ways to make it more efficient on the back end, more valuable on the back end, to be able to provide more value to the clients, which in turn allowed me to charge more. So even when I was analyzing a property with the tools that we have, it might spit out a 22% return, but that's with the data that I have right there in front of me. Once we own the asset, then we can start developing ways to make that 22% return 28% and 32%. And then over a long enough timeline, there are ways to take your investment and make it more efficient in the ways of lowering your mortgage as macroeconomics change. Don't need to dive down that rabbit hole right now, but you learn little tricks of the trade. And for the people watching, one of those things for me was to allow pets.
Mm-hmm.
When I ran my numbers on this property, they allowed pets, but they did not charge for pets. So you just start doing the math and you realize that 50% of your guests want to bring their dog to your property and they will pay to do that. So if you have 100 people that come to your property in a year and 50 of them are willing to pay $150, do the math. That is 3 months worth of mortgage payments.
Wow.
That definitely helps your margins.
Absolutely. And it kind of blew my mind when we were, before getting on camera talking about how this one's been performing. And, we're in Wardensville, West Virginia, which a lot of people may not even realize where that is. Relatively small town. Some may seem like the middle of nowhere. How did you go about picking this property and, being able to see the potential in it, seeing as it is doing so well.
Yeah. It's if you've never been to Wardensville, it is just your classic small town USA. This one happens to be in West Virginia. So right over the mountain, we say, as those that come from Winchester say. I was, just to tell you guys, I wasn't looking here to begin with. I was looking on the east side of the mountains, Winchester area, Linden, Front Royal, and just so happens one day I expanded the map out a little bit and this property popped up, and I actually had never been to Wardensville, and I saw how beautiful this property was. It was a brand new property. The owners prior to me had owned it for less than a year. And so I booked a viewing, and as I drove over the mountain and came on the back side, and you see the beautiful mountains of West Virginia. It's a beautiful state for a reason. And driving through a town of 250 residents, you're like, there's nothing out here. And then you drive into George Washington National Forest, and boom, an absolute beautiful black A-frame cabin is just sitting in the middle of the woods. And that's how I ended up finding it. And it's like, can a property like this in a small town perform? And again, I had to educate myself. Well, who would come to this area? Well, it's certainly the people that don't live in this area. And so it's almost like you look at the antithesis. Who would not live here but wants to be here? Well, the people that aren't living in the woods. So what's the opposite of the woods? The city. And Wardensville is 2 hours from Washington, D.C. So everyone that has to see concrete buildings and lots of noise and lots of cars and lots of people, where do they want to go on Friday and Saturday? The opposite of that. And you cannot go to anywhere more opposite Washington, D.C. than Wardensville, West Virginia.
Absolutely.
And it's a beautiful town. And the residents of this town, the businesses that are in this town have really taken it upon themselves to reinvigorate the one street that this town has. And they have beautiful restaurants, and they have a beautiful garden market, and they have a beautiful trading post, and they have one bookstore with toys that you can take your kids to. And it's really like the epitome of what we need in this country, in small town USA.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Sterling, and when we moved out here about 5 years ago, we were looking either more towards Winchester, and then I started dabbling a little further out, kind of closer to this area or Hampshire County. And as much as I just kept getting drawn out here, I just couldn't really picture living here full time, especially with young kids and thinking about schools and, local amenities. And a lot of clients that I talk with that reach out, living in DC or Loudoun County, thinking about purchasing either, a family getaway, vacation home, are also asking if it would make sense to kind of have both a family getaway and use it as a short-term rental. Is that something that you've seen, or what are your thoughts on something like that?
Absolutely. Some of the other people you might find on the internet that are promoting products for real estate investing and short-term rentals are going to say it's just about the numbers. I'm a real human being, so I have emotion. And so for me, when I'm looking at investments, especially with the short-term rentals, it did come down to financial strategy, but also lifestyle strategy. So when I'm going to, again, put my money into something, it's going to be something that I want to care about. It's going to be something that I'm going to want to take my family to and stay in. But you made a very good point there. Look around. This is a very beautiful A-frame cabin in a very beautiful small town. And even though that is romantic and that is sexy, for most people that are working and living their life and having kids, it's just not a realistic place to live every single day of your life. And that's why this property specifically does really well, because people want to stay in an A-frame cabin. They just particularly don't want to live in an A-frame cabin. So to talk to your clients, yeah, I mean, investing your money in something that you can use and allow others to use and get a beautiful experience with their spouse and kids, and that's going to pay the bills and put money in your pocket, I think it ultimately is the best of both worlds, which makes it the holy grail of real estate investing, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I mean, it almost seems like it's a hack, being able to invest in something and get that enjoyment and creating, memories with the family. I mean, is that something that you've done with some of the properties that you own?
Yeah. Full transparency, we had planned to stay here a lot more than we have over the past few years of owning it, but we have stayed here. Thankfully, the property has done incredible. It's been an amazing investment. And so all weekends are booked out. But it's very fun and interesting to see when that Saturday night booking might be open because someone booked Wednesday to Saturday morning. And this happened last July 4th. Was someone booked a few days before July 4th, and they left the morning of July 4th, but someone booked for the day after July 4th. And so the night of July 4th was open. And so we packed the kids up and drove out to the middle of West Virginia and stayed here in the beautiful cabin. And then, it's interesting because people listening to this, they take vacations. They're paying other people to stay in their house. And so when you can invest in a place that you want to go to, a place that you're willing to put your family in the vehicle for a weekend and go to, it makes sense to me. And it is part of that memory making process. My kids know that this is ours. My kids know that we can come here. My kids also know that this is a family investment. This is something that we want to hold long term. And so when I look at the type of investment business that I wanted to run, because this is an investment, but it also has the dual side of being the hospitality business. Why this cabin? Why this town? It goes back to reverse engineering on who do we want to help? Who do we want to serve? And it's people like me and my wife. It's husbands and wives that need a weekend getaway. It's husbands and wives that want to take their kids out of the city and into the trails of West Virginia. Again, George Washington National Forest. There are 10,000 acres backed up to this property line. And there are plenty of beautiful trails, some short, some long here. And so we thought, who do we want to help? Who do we want to create experiences with? Those were the people. And if you're listening to this and you want that experience for yourself and you want the benefits of investing in real estate, using the framework that I've used, that I've created to buy small mountain town homes, is a very, very viable investment for a lot of people. And most of those people don't think that it's possible. And I'm here to tell you that it is. And we can talk about some of those fears that people have, because I had them. 2.5 years ago, I knew nothing about short-term rentals or even how to create a listing on Airbnb.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know when I'm thinking about it, a lot of things that come up for myself and also some of the clients that I talk with is how to even go about acquiring the property. A lot of people think that you need to get a traditional mortgage or you need to put some large amount down. So they kind of talk, myself or themselves out of it. And then at the same time, also thinking about how much time am I going to need to invest consistently to keep something like this up and running? Absolutely.
Yeah. So people take traditional financing for home buying and they think that's the only way to buy investment properties. And I thought the same way. So I was running typical numbers and you're running into some issues with using typical financing for buying an investment property. And so I had to expand my thinking and again, broaden my education and learn about asset-backed debt and asset-backed financing, DSCR loans, debt service coverage ratio loans.
Can you break down what that?
Yeah, it's going to be a loan where the person that's providing you with the money is going to be looking at the value of the property and the potential value of the revenues. And that's what they're going to lend on. You don't have to submit tons of paperwork and hand over your life to the underwriters. They're going to be looking at the asset.
So it's not about your credit, not about your income.
That's right. Wow. That's right. Bank statement loans. Maybe you are a good steward of money, or maybe you own a business and you have other assets. Instead of handing over all your tax returns and handing over your W-2 income and all this other stuff, you can just show them your bank statements. People will lend on that. There are numerous things that you can do in order to acquire the assets that you wish to acquire. For this property, to be fully honest with the people watching, we didn't put any of our own money into the down payment of this property. We borrowed, creative financing, we borrowed 90% of the money for the asset. Then we borrowed against one of our assets that we already owned to put the down payment on this property. So when you're looking at your cash in a bank account, not $1 came out of a bank account from our family to buy this property. So again, to break down some numbers, this is a $500,000 property in a town that has 250 residents that produces over $100,000 of revenues per year with very healthy margins. The money that's left over. Yeah. So it's been very good. You did ask about the amount of work that goes into it, and I think that is a big fear for people. They don't want to get the phone calls at midnight. And here's the thing, again, this is about reverse engineering your client, the person that you want to come to your property. And most people aren't showing up at midnight. Most properties, you're going to have your cleaners taking care of your property, checking things out before people arrive. So you already know that the property is functioning, that the water is working, the heat's working, the power is on, the internet's connected. And talk about the work. Let's talk about that. Everyone uses their phone. Everybody texts their husband and wife, and even when they're at work. So this business is no different than what I do on a regular basis. I have my phone near me, I get a message, I can respond to it. Now, I have co-hosts, my cleaner and her husband for my North Carolina property, a property management company. I own my listing and I create them as co-hosts. So I create systems that they can respond to anyone whenever they want. But I still like to be involved. This is not a passive investment. I think that's a term that gets thrown around way too much by people that are trying to sell short-term products on short-term rentals. There's a reason why the Active STR Academy is named the way it is. We want you to be involved in your business. We want you to be involved in your asset, because the second you take your eyeballs off something, it starts to die. It starts to deteriorate. If you don't look at your personal finances, they're not going to improve. If you don't put effort into your marriage, it's not going to improve. If you don't put effort into parenting well, it's not going to improve. Same thing with your investment. It does not mean that you're going to be working 24/7. It does not mean that you're at the whim of people showing up at your property and blowing up your phone to answer every little thing. 95% of the people that show up at your Airbnb, when you're doing it right, and it doesn't take that much effort to do it right. There's so many people doing it wrong because they thought it was going to be a passive investment and they thought it was easy money. It's not, but it doesn't take that much extra effort to get it right for people. They show up, they don't want to message the host. They want to enjoy the time that they bought for the weekend.
Just walk in and unwind.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you have to set up your property to be able to do that. It should be super seamless, super easy for someone to come into your property and know exactly where everything is. It's not that hard to put labels on the light switches. Here's the light for the kitchen island. Here's the light for the chandelier. Here's the light for the bathroom fan. Label it. Make it easy. Imagine yourself as the guest, the customer. That's actually what I do when I'm analyzing a property. Yes, it's about the data, but I'll tell you what weighs just as much as the data, the drive to the property. About 1 mile away from that property, something changes in my head. I am now the guest.
Yep.
And I am imagining I just made a hour-long drive. I just made a 2-hour drive from the city. What headspace am I in? I'm excited. I'm ready to see. Well, how tight are these turns? How hard is it to drive? How far out from the house did it turn to rock and not paved roads? What's that going to be like in the wintertime? What do the other houses look like? You might be looking at a beautiful house, but is it next to some rundown homes? Do the people across the street have flags hanging up in their yard that your guest from DC is not going to enjoy looking at after they pay $800 a night? Well, that's not about the investment property. Tell me it's not. Yes, it is. And look at the reviews to some of the other properties in town, and you're going to find out real quick that is what other properties are struggling with. They're struggling with the area around the house. So it is about the data. It is about the property, but it's just as much about the environment, and it's certainly about the experience of the guest.
And on that, when you're first setting up, say after you bought this and you're setting it up, you've felt the experience, you have the person in mind that you want to come enjoy it. How do you go about getting people to come? Other than just putting something on Airbnb or is it that simple where you just, snap some photos and, hope they show up?
Yeah. So million different pathways to answer this question. I can tell you what I did. I did purchase 2 Airbnbs that were already active. And so at the time of acceptance and purchase, there were guests on the books. And as a new investor into the short-term market game, if you go that route, obviously that tightens the available homes that you could buy if you're only looking for one that already has active guests on the books that you need to transfer to your property. But because I did it that way to begin with, I closed on a Thursday and my first guest checked in Friday.
That's awesome.
And I got paid on Saturday. And that payment covered half the mortgage for the month.
Wow.
Now, with that being said, as I bought more properties, and the last one in North Carolina was a brand new house, never was on Airbnb. So I had to take what I learned before, okay, how long did I transfer bookings for? Well, I started about 2 weeks out. Okay, but they already had people on the books. So in order to get my runway going, I had my property in North Carolina listed 30 days before I closed. So some people listening to this would say that's a risk. If you're going to get into the investment game, you are now an entrepreneur, so there is risk involved. So I had my closing date. I gave us a week blocked off after that closing date, because how many closings get pushed farther than a week? I know that there's stories out there of that happening, but we were pretty set on our closing date. So we listed our home 30 days out with a week buffer. And here's a kicker, take some notes. We plan to stay in it for 3 days, the day after closing. So we could figure out, is there anything wrong with the brand new build? But again, you figure out the things that are going on with the home now that you're living in it for 3 days. So that was the strategy that we used. We promoted the house on Airbnb 30 days before we owned it. And we blocked out 7 days with the intent to stay in it 3 days after closing. I know other people create social media handles for their properties. I think that's fine. I think that's great. I know they create websites to get direct bookings so they can, save the guests some money and probably pocket more themselves. I'm not saying that I'm not a fan of those. I personally haven't used them because of the benefits that Airbnb, the platform, has provided. The type of client avatar that I'm looking for is a busy person. They already have a job. They want a seamless way to book your property, and Airbnb is the best platform to get your property seen and get that property booked, especially as a new listing, because they will bump you up in the algorithm as a new listing. That's why you have to have great photos, because they're going to put you at the top and you want to have it be very, very eye-catching. It required less work. They made it very easy to make a listing. I didn't have to build out a website. I didn't have to create a lease agreement that I have to email to people that find me on my Instagram handle and SEO and open myself to other liabilities that way. Airbnb has protection for their hosts, regardless of the articles that you're reading and the clickbait headlines and people saying Airbnb is dying, Airbnb doesn't take care of their hosts. If you take care of your property and your guests, Airbnb takes care of you. If you don't put any work into your property, why would another company put work into you? I've had nothing but great experiences with the Airbnb platform, and that was a big fear of mine, being lifted as I got into the game and using their platform. And you do right for the property, the platform will do right for you.
Yeah, so it's interesting to hear, because I know when I'm thinking about it, if I saw a way that I could potentially save money on fees and, just keep out a middleman, that just sounds like it makes sense. But it sounds like to you, Airbnb has definitely provided a lot of value. And, what would you say are some instances that could have gone really negatively if it was, directly you and the consumer versus having Airbnb as kind of the buffer?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said earlier, 95% of guests want to show up, have the property work, and not communicate with you. Of course, there's times where little things are off and they'll message you and you have someone tell them where they can find XYZ to fix it, or have them adjust it, or if you have your handyman ready, they can come out and fix something. And then there's the very, very, very small percent of the people that find something wrong with everything. And I don't want to talk to them directly, but if I did not have them book my property in Airbnb and they booked it through a direct booking website, they might leave the property in not great shape, because even though I have a lease agreement in place, how hard is it going to be for me to get that money from them on the damage that they caused because they were upset about something. Now I have to get who involved? The cops, the lawyers, who? Who? Now I have to do all the work. So that's where it could go wrong if it's not on the platform. Airbnb is going to handle all that for me. They're going to have air cover. I'm going to submit my reimbursement with pictures, with receipts, with messages back and forth from the guest. Again, guests can say in whatever they want, however they want. I'm going to be professional. I'm going to be hospitable, and I'm going to have that as proof on what we did for the guests in these situations that occur, which are few and far between, rare occurrences that something happens. But I would not want to be the person handling that from point A to point Z. So having Airbnb, the platform there to protect you, to back you up when you have the proper documentation and you tried to do the right thing, I think that's a very undervalued aspect to why people are paying extra fees on the platform, and why as a host a percentage of your revenue goes to that as well. We're all in this together. So yeah, when someone books my place and a percentage goes to Airbnb, it might not come back to me today, but it may come back to me in the future when something happens. But that's going to go to maybe another host this past weekend that ran into an issue. And when I'm looking at the collective, I want all the ships to rise, right? I want everyone to do well. So I'm okay with that. And I'm just going to do my best to reap the financial benefit from the property that we put in place and how we handle our business.
So it sounds like you're willing to take a little bit less of a margin to be able to buy back some of that peace of mind. But with that said, Airbnb has a certain customer. Would you say that as the property owner, that you're Airbnb's customer, or is it more the people coming to visit and stay here?
Yeah, I think the answer can be D, all the above. They do a good job at trying to get both sides of the situation. And I've had nothing but mostly really good experiences with Airbnb. There have been moments where I disagreed with their decisions and outcomes. But ladies and gentlemen, this is business. You're not going to get your way all of the time. And so you have to have a little bit of empathy for the guests, even if you disagree with them. You have to have a little bit of empathy for Airbnb, the company, but you're not talking to the company, you're talking to another person on the phone that is employed by Airbnb. And so, when I look back at the times where I may have been frustrated as a host or disagreed with their decision, it's probably the moments where I was emotionally compromised as a human being, and we all have our moments and make our mistakes. So you have to come at every interaction you have with the guests or the company that, hey, at the end of the day, we're all human and we're not going to get our way all of the time. So I understand that the relationship I have with the platform has certainly benefited me and my investment. And so it's like a family, like a friendship. You're not going to agree 100% of the time, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah. And before we met up, I was looking at some headlines, and it seems like there's a lot of talk of, Airbnb and short-term rentals crashing and burning all over the country. What would you say to that?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't pay attention every day in school, but I did learn about the standard bell curve. So look, there's going to be people who do horribly. There's going to be people who do very, very well. And then there's going to be the majority right there in the middle. And that's why everything I do, I don't want to be in the middle. I don't want to be average. Again, look around at this property. This is special. This is unique. This is a place that I don't just want to own. This is a place that I want to bring my family. And so I had to do a little bit extra work to understand what it takes to be in the upper 10%, the upper 20%. I'll believe that Airbnb will crash and burn when people stop using the name as a verb. The short-term rental market is going nowhere. It hasn't just been around since Airbnb's been around. It's been around for decades. And so as an entrepreneur, you'll learn if and when it's time to pivot to something else. I don't think we're anywhere close to that. You have to focus on your asset. You have to focus on your business. You have to focus on how you're providing the experience for the guests and getting those good reviews, making sure that you're taking care of your team, your cleaner, making sure that you're taking care and talking kindly to your handyman, that you have a direct line of communication to those that are adding value to your property. I don't believe it's going to crash and burn. I think it's a very good way to get people's eyeballs on your article written. But at the end of the day, the more that you watch real people like me that knew nothing years ago, that just put in the work to learn about the side of the business that I didn't know and the side of the investment game that I didn't know and implement it. I didn't have an A+ at this when I started. I was a C student, but C students do the best because they have runway. They can get better. And that's what we did here. We made some early mistakes, right? Not having proper supplies, not having enough supply, right? We allowed more people to stay in the property than was viable, and you start learning those processes. For example, right, what is the ideal property for me? The ideal property for me is less than 1,500 square feet in a mountain town where people are coming year round. And I thought that I wanted more people in my property. I thought I wanted 8 people in my property. I did the math in my head. Okay, I could, again, make the asset more efficient. I could charge an extra $50 per person above 6, right? And I could make it, that's good for the consumer because now they're spreading the costs out against other people. You guys take notes. This is one lesson I learned. The difference between 6 people having a get together in a house and 8 is night and day. And so I had to learn very quickly in the early months that I did not want parties of 8 people in my beautiful A-frame cabin. And so I had to refine exactly, again, I had an idea of who I wanted, but as you start experiencing just the type of people, everyone's different, the type of people that you want to come to your properties, you narrowed it down to, husband and wife couples coming without their kids or coming with their kids. And if they can't afford $800 plus per night, then all they're going to do is invite the husband and wife couple that they're best friends with. Mm-hmm. And now they just got the experience of an $800 a night beautiful A-frame cabin in a small town for half the price because they're going to split it with another couple, right? And so those are potential horror stories that you're going to hear about. One person in the middle of this town as a host ran into this issue, but there's risk in everything that you do. Okay, but I believe Airbnb protects you as a host. I believe that when you look at not being an average property, not being an average investor, not being an average business owner, your results aren't going to be average.
Yep, and that's something that I definitely, in everything that I do as well, I want to make sure that I'm, performing at top performance as much as I can. And you dropped a lot of nuggets there, but what would you say would be either the top 1 or 2 just things that you've learned when getting started specifically that could just completely be a game changer for someone starting out?
You might read headlines on how to buy an Airbnb on a tight budget. I'm all about saving money. I can teach anyone how to make the living room look beautiful without spending $20,000. I'm all about that. But when you have too tight of a mind to spend a couple extra $100 on the best photographer in your town, you need to view that expense as an investment. The ROI on having the best photos in your area of your beautiful property, they're going to pay dividends forever. That may be the passive part of the short-term rental investment. You're going to take pictures one time, and it's going to return you for years on end. So one, do not skimp on the photos. Along with the photos, don't oversell your property. You don't need 3 pictures of your living room. You don't need 5 pictures of the bedroom. You don't need 10 pictures of the kitchen, no matter how beautiful it is. People need an idea of what the property looks like and feels like. Don't oversell your property. You don't need pictures of every little thing. Oh, cool. You have a washer dryer. That's in the listing. You don't need a photo of it from your iPhone.
Seems common sense. But
seems like common sense. But again, this is my first short-term rental. I need to market it. Marketing it does not mean market every inch of it. Mm-hmm. That's different. Best photographer will take the best photos from the best angles with the best lighting of the best parts of your property. That's all you need. The less photos, the better.
And what would you say, or do you mind sharing what you spent on photography for this one in particular?
Yeah, very, very lucky. That was rolled into the investment in itself.
Oh, nice.
So the prior owners who stood it up as an Airbnb before me, I did purchase the photos from them. That was just rolled in. That they rolled that into the purchase of the property. North Carolina property, Blowing Rock, North Carolina. We spent about $450 on those photos. For the for those of you that have paid for photographers before, he was a very good real estate photographer, and I was actually pleasantly surprised with the quote that he gave me, and so definitely got him to take the photos of the property, and they're paying dividends to this day as well. So I would have paid $1,000. I would have paid $1,500. Here's one thing, like, if you're just going to list it on Airbnb, you don't need to pay extra for the video. Sorry to the photographers and videographers out there. But you know, one video you're not going to post a million times on your Facebook page. You just need really good photos. That's what people are going to the Airbnb app for.
And last question for you. What would you say is your next step as far as Airbnb investments go?
Yeah, Airbnb investments. I'm always looking. I already said earlier that I am a financial and emotional investor. I'm not trying to be emotionally stupid on my investments, but I'll know it when I see it. If you told me 2 years ago that I would have 3 short-term rentals, one in 3 different states, you know, Virginia, West Virginia, North Carolina, I would have told you were crazy. But you take this game one step at a time. You're a C student. You're not going to be an A+ student overnight. Get your first property. Once you own that property, you're going to learn some lessons that are going to make you better on the second property. When the numbers make sense and you feel good about it, you get that second property. So tough question to answer, because a year from now, we could do another podcast and I might still own 3 properties, but I also might own 6.
And you're getting ready to start helping other people find their way into Airbnb investing. Is that right?
Yep. So Active STR Academy, what we're going to do is show people that this isn't as hard and fearful as what it's been made out to be. It's also not as easy as it's been made out to be. We're going to be real people giving you real information on how to make a very real investment for your family. And what we're going to do is we're going to help you understand the data, understand the research, understand the tools, and then we're going to hold your hand from point A to point Z. We're going to get you from not being a short-term rental investor to being a super house, to getting to that top 10%, to be in the top 20%. We don't want you at the top of the bell curve. We want you on the right side of it.
So what would be the best way for anybody that's interested to reach out, you know, be able to get in contact with you regarding the Academy? Because I know I'm going to reach out, but, you know, just for everybody else that's watching.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Rex. You know, I'm a real person. You guys can hit me up on Instagram at Shawn_Rider_. My phone's right next to me. When we're done this interview, I'm going to shake your hand, and I'm a teacher, dude. I get asked questions all the time. I'm going to check my Instagram. I might have a message from someone, and I'll answer it. I have my phone on me all the time. I love helping people. I love answering short questions. You got one question, just send me a DM. I'll give you my best honest thought. At the end of the day, I'm not here to tell people what to do. I'm going to help them with a way of thinking, and I need to empower you to make your own decisions. But I appreciate people who do reach out for help, and that's what I do. So ask me anything. I'll give you my thought from my experiences. But I'm a learner in my own self. So I'm out there. I'm educating myself. I'm learning from people who I feel are doing things to the top 10%. That's where I want to be. That's who I'm going to learn from. So you know, I've definitely learned from my experiences, but there's a lot of other people that I get some great information from. So just hit me up on Instagram, guys. I'll answer your DMs. But Rex, appreciate the time, appreciate the questions. Fantastic podcast host. So hopefully we get to do this a year from now.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
Thanks.